You did it! I know it! Liar! You're the one! Admit it now! Get off me! You're not getting away! This is assault! Stop! Great-ass crap! You're a disgrace! Bring it on, cop! You won't get away with this! This is for every innocent person! Stop this immediately! Order in a court! Door on door! Shut for this! Stay! You're out of line! Why? Me, officer! That's it! Get off me! Stop! Break it up! Stop! You're under arrest! I don't think so!
Officer Grant Whitaker sat in the defendant's chair, leaning back with a smirk that curdled the blood of everyone watching. He thought this was a joke. He thought the badge on his chest was a shield that made him a god among men. He had broken a man's jaw during a traffic stop, planted evidence, and laughed about it with his buddies. But Grant made one fatal calculation error. The man he left bleeding on the asphalt wasn't just a suspect. He was Special Agent Corbin Hale, a decorated FBI operative deep undercover, and today, inside this courtroom, the hunter was about to become the prey. Grant thought the evidence was gone. He thought the blue wall of silence would save him. But he was about to learn that when you strike a Fed, karma doesn't just hit back. It destroys you. The air inside the Superior Court of Cook County was thick enough to choke on, smelling faintly of lemon floor wax and old nervous sweat. It was the kind of atmosphere that usually made men tremble, their knees knocking together beneath the heavy oak tables as they awaited judgment. But Officer Grant Whitaker was not trembling. In fact, he looked bored. Grant sat at the defense table, his uniform pressed to military precision, though today he had been advised to wear a civilian suit. He had chosen a navy blue number that cost more than most people's cars, a subtle flex of the wealth he had accumulated through off-the-books seizures throughout his career. He adjusted his silk tie, glancing over his shoulder at the gallery. It was packed. Half the room was filled with uniformed officers, the blue wall showing up to support one of their own. The other half was a sea of angry citizens, reporters, and the family of the victim. Grant caught the eye of Sergeant Royce Tanner, his patrol supervisor, who gave him a subtle, reassuring nod. "Don't worry, Grant," the nod said. "We scrubbed it. You're clear." Grant turned back, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. He had plans at the country club. If his lawyer, the exorbitantly expensive Preston Lang, did his job, he'd be out of here in time for a relaxing afternoon. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed, his voice bouncing off the high, coffered ceiling. Judge Lydia Hargrove swept into the room. She was a woman of steel and stone, known for her no-nonsense approach and a gavel hand that struck like thunder. She didn't look at Grant. She didn't look at the prosecution. She arranged her robes, opened the file in front of her, and peered over her spectacles. "Be seated," she commanded. The room shuffled and settled into a heavy silence. "We are here for the matter of the people versus Grant Whitaker. The charges are aggravated assault, obstruction of justice, falsifying police reports, and violation of civil rights under color of law. Mr. Lang, is the defense ready?" Preston Lang stood up, buttoning his jacket. He was a shark in human skin, a man who had made a career out of getting corrupt officials off the hook. "We are, Your Honor, and we intend to show that the officer acted strictly within the bounds of his duty, protecting the community from a perceived lethal threat." "Miss Fletcher," Judge Hargrove turned to the prosecution. ADA Naomi Fletcher stood. She was younger than Lang, sharp-featured and intense, with eyes that seemed to burn with a cold, righteous fire. She was the assistant district attorney, but everyone knew the Department of Justice was watching over her shoulder on this one. "The people are ready, Your Honor." "Opening statements," Judge Hargrove ruled. As Fletcher walked to the center of the floor, Grant leaned over to Lang. "Look at her," he whispered, his voice dripping with condescension. "She looks like she's shaking. She knows she's got nothing since the body cam footage got corrupted." Lang didn't smile. He kept his eyes on the jury. "Shut up, Grant. Just look like a hero. Let me handle the law." Fletcher stopped in front of the jury box. She didn't shout. She didn't pace. She just looked at them one by one. "On that night," Fletcher began, her voice clear and resonant, "Officer Grant Whitaker pulled over a vehicle for a broken taillight, a simple routine stop, a ticket, maybe a warning. That is what it should have been. Instead, within moments of exiting his cruiser, Officer Whitaker had dragged the driver out of the car, thrown him against the hood, and delivered a tactical strike, a punch that shattered the driver's jaw in 2 places. She paused, letting the violence of the image sink in. Officer Whitaker claimed the driver was reaching for a weapon. He claimed the driver was resisting. He claimed he feared for his life. But we are here today to prove that the officer didn't fear for his life. He feared nothing because he believed he was above the law. He saw a black man in a luxury car and decided to teach him a lesson about his place. But the man he punched wasn't a criminal. The man he assaulted was Special Agent Corbin Hale of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd, even though most knew the basic facts. Hearing it stated so plainly made the tension spike. Grant rolled his eyes. FBI, he thought. Fancy badge. Doesn't mean he didn't reach. My word against his. Fletcher pointed a finger at Grant, not with anger, but with accusation. You will hear how Officer Whitaker mocked the victim while he lay bleeding. You will hear how he turned off his body camera. But you will also learn that the truth has a way of surfacing, no matter how deep you try to bury it. She sat down. Grant snorted softly. Good luck with that, lady. Preston Lang stood up, smoothing his silver hair. He walked to the jury with a warm, grandfatherly smile. Ladies and gentlemen, the prosecution wants to tell you a story about a villain. It's a compelling story, but it's fiction. The reality of police work is split-second decisions. Adrenaline. Life or death. Officer Whitaker saw a movement, a glint of metal. He reacted as he was trained to do to ensure he went home to his wife and 2 daughters. The fact that the driver turned out to be a federal agent is a tragedy, a misunderstanding. But it does not make Officer Whitaker a criminal. It makes him a human being who made a judgment call in a dark alley. Don't let the badge of the victim blind you to the reality of the street. Lang returned to the table. Solid, Grant whispered. They're eating it up. But as Grant looked across the aisle, his gaze landed on the table behind the prosecutor. There, sitting perfectly still, was Corbin Hale. Hale's jaw was wired shut, a brutal reminder of the assault. His face was still swollen, the bruising fading to a sickly yellow-green. But his eyes were locked on Grant. There was no fear in them. There was no anger. There was only a terrifying, predatory calm. It was the look of a man who had hunted cartels and terrorists, a man who knew exactly how the trap would snap shut. For the first time that morning, Grant Whitaker felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his spine. The trial moved into the evidence phase, and in the early stages, things seemed to be going exactly as Grant had predicted. The prosecution called the paramedics who testified to the severity of Hale's injuries, but Lang tore them apart on cross-examination, forcing them to admit that combat injuries often looked worse than they were, and that a fall against the pavement could have caused the fracture, not necessarily a punch. Then came the testimony of Sergeant Royce Tanner. This was the moment Grant had been banking on. Tanner, a large man with a neck that spilled over his collar, took the stand. He swore to tell the truth, his hand resting heavy on the Bible. Sergeant Tanner, Lang asked, you arrived on the scene shortly after the incident, correct? Yes, sir. Describe the demeanor of Officer Whitaker. He was shaken. Tanner lied smoothly. He was pacing. He told me the suspect, the driver, had made a sudden move toward the center console. Officer Whitaker was hyperventilating a bit, typical stress response to a near-death encounter. And did you search the victim's vehicle? We did. Did you find a weapon? Tanner paused for effect. We found a tire iron under the passenger seat and a large, heavy flashlight in the center console within easy reach. The jury scribbled notes. A flashlight could be a weapon. It was plausible. Now, Sergeant, Lang lowered his voice, regarding the body cameras, can you explain why there is no footage from Officer Whitaker's perspective? Tanner sighed, acting the part of the frustrated bureaucrat perfectly. Equipment failure, plain and simple. We've been having issues with that batch of cams for months. The battery port corrodes. It shorts out when there's sudden movement or impact. It's a budget issue. We've requested upgrades. He shrugged helplessly. So the camera malfunctioned at the exact moment of the altercation. Unfortunate timing, Tanner agreed. But it happens more than you think. Grant watched the jury. Several of them nodded sympathetically. Technology failed. Everyone knew that. The blue wall was holding. The lie was becoming the truth. But then it was ADA Naomi Fletcher's turn. She approached Tanner carrying a thick binder. She slammed it onto the podium with a thud that made Tanner blink. Sergeant Tanner, she began, her voice razor sharp. You stated that the camera malfunctioned due to a known battery port issue. Is that correct? That's right. And you logged this malfunction in your official report. I did. I have the maintenance logs for District 4 here. Fletcher opened the binder. Officer Whitaker's camera, serial number 894 Bravo, was issued brand new shortly before the incident. It was not part of the corroded batch you mentioned, which was recalled previously. Would you like to explain how a brand new camera developed corrosion so quickly? Tanner shifted in his seat. Well, maybe I was mistaken about the batch, but electronics are faulty. It happens. Interesting, Fletcher said, flipping a page. You also stated you found a tire iron and a heavy flashlight, but the initial impound report, the one filed by the towing company, not the police department, lists the vehicle contents. They list the tire iron in the trunk under the spare tire, and the center console was empty, save for a pack of gum and a cell phone. The tow driver must have missed it, Tanner snapped, his face reddening. They aren't trained investigators. So the tow driver moved the tire iron from under the passenger seat, put it in the spare tire well, and then logged it. Fletcher raised an eyebrow. That seems like a lot of work for a tow truck driver, Sergeant. Objection, Lang jumped up. Speculation. Sustained, Judge Hargrove said, though her eyes narrowed at Tanner. Let's move on, Fletcher continued, relentless. You said Officer Whitaker was shaken, but we have the dispatch audio recording from after the incident. Would you like to hear it? Without waiting for an answer, she signaled the tech booth. The courtroom speakers crackled, static. Whitaker's voice. Dispatch 104. Suspect is down. Send a bus. Non-emergency. Guy's leaking a bit. A laugh. A distinct, cruel chuckle. Whitaker's voice. Yeah, Tanner. I clocked him. He's crying about his jaw. Think I broke his fancy teeth. That's what happens when you buy a car you can't afford, right? The courtroom went dead silent. The audio quality was crisp. There was no fear in that voice. There was only adrenaline and cruelty. Does that sound like a man who is hyperventilating from fear, Sergeant? Or does that sound like a man bragging about a trophy? People react differently to stress. Tanner stammered, his credibility crumbling with every word. No further questions, Fletcher said, turning her back on him. As Tanner stepped down, he refused to look at Grant. The air in the room had shifted. The arrogance at the defense table had evaporated, replaced by a tense, vibrating anxiety. Grant leaned toward Lang. You said they didn't have the radio logs. You said the private channel wasn't recorded. The private channel is recorded at the main switchboard, you idiot, Lang hissed, his face pale. You just didn't think they'd pull the raw data. Fix this, Grant growled. I'm trying, Lang snapped. But you better hope your testimony is better than Tanner's, because right now you look like a monster. Call me to the stand, Grant said, adjusting his tie, trying to regain his composure. I can sell it. I just need to look them in the eye. I'll make them believe me. Lang looked at him doubtfully. Be careful, Grant. Fletcher isn't playing. And that FBI agent? He hasn't blinked in hours. Grant looked over at Corbin Hale again. The agent was still watching him, and, for a fleeting second, Grant thought he saw the swollen corner of Hale's mouth twitch upward. Not a smile of joy, a smile of anticipation. What does he know? Grant thought. What the hell does he have? The defense calls the defendant, Grant Whitaker, to the stand, Lang announced. Grant stood up. It was time to perform. He walked to the witness box, projecting every ounce of good cop energy he could muster. But as he passed the prosecution table, he heard a sound. It was a soft, metallic click. He looked down. Corbin Hale was holding a pen. He clicked it once, then twice. It felt like a countdown. Grant Whitaker settled into the witness chair, smoothing the crease of his expensive trousers. He exhaled a long, shaky breath, a calculated move designed to simulate the residual trauma of a man who had faced death. He looked at the jury, making eye contact with the older woman in the second row who had nodded at him earlier. He gave her a small, vulnerable smile. Preston Lang approached the stand gently, treating Grant not like a defendant, but like a survivor. Officer Whitaker, Lang began, his voice soft, almost fatherly. I know this is difficult. I know reliving that night is the last thing you want to do, but the jury needs to understand your state of mind. Tell us about the moment you approached the vehicle. Grant nodded, clearing his throat. It was dark. The streetlights on Fifth Avenue were out again. The vehicle, a black Mercedes, had tinted windows. Illegal tint, way past the legal limit. I couldn't see inside. That puts an officer on edge immediately. You don't know if there's a family in there or 4 guys with AR-15s. And you initiated the stop because of a taillight? Yes, Grant said, but it wasn't just the light. The car was swerving slightly. I suspected impairment, maybe drunk driving. My job is to keep the road safe. Walk us through the interaction, Lang coaxed. I approached the driver's side. I tapped the glass. The driver, he didn't roll it down right away. He cracked it maybe an inch. I asked for license and registration. He was aggressive immediately. Aggressive how? Verbally? Grant lied, his voice gaining confidence. He said, "Why are you bothering me?" He was cursing. He told me I didn't know who I was messing with. His tone was threatening. Then he moved. Grant mimed a sudden jerking motion. He twisted his body toward the center console. Fast, too fast. I yelled, "Hands! Show me your hands!" He didn't listen. He kept digging. In my training, that means one thing. He's grabbing a gun. And what did you feel in that moment, Grant? Grant paused. He looked down at his hands, then up at the jury, forcing a tear to well in the corner of his eye. I thought about my daughters. I thought, this is it. I'm going to die in this alley over a taillight. I didn't want to hurt him. I just wanted to stop the threat. I opened the door, grabbed him, and struck him once to disorient him. It was purely defensive. Thank you, officer. No further questions. Lang walked back to his seat, looking satisfied. The narrative was set. The hero cop versus the belligerent suspect. Judge Hargrove turned to the prosecution table. Miss Fletcher, your witness. A.D. A. Naomi Fletcher didn't stand up immediately. She sat there writing something on her legal pad. The silence stretched. The jury shifted. Grant frowned. Was she hesitating? Finally, she stood. She didn't hold a binder this time. She walked to the center of the room, empty-handed, and stared at Grant. Officer Whitaker, she said, her voice eerily calm. You mentioned the windows were tinted pitch black. You couldn't see inside. That's right, Grant said, guarding himself. If you couldn't see inside, Fletcher said, tilting her head, how did you see him twist his body toward the center console before you opened the door? Grant blinked. I could see the silhouette through the crack in the window. The 1-inch crack? Yes, at night with no streetlights. I had my flashlight. Grant snapped. Ah, your flashlight. The one you held in your left hand while you opened the door with your right. Yes. But in your initial report filed after the incident, you stated suspect opened the door aggressively, causing me to strike him. Today you said you opened the door. Which is it, Grant? Grant's jaw tightened. He hadn't read his initial report in months. It happened fast. Maybe I opened it. Maybe he popped the latch. The point is the door opened and he was reaching. Let's talk about that reach, Fletcher said, stepping closer. She was entering his personal space now, encroaching on the cop bubble he was used to protecting. You said he was digging for a weapon, but we established that the tire iron was in the trunk. The flashlight was in the console, but it was buried under papers. So what was he reaching for? I didn't know at the time. Grant raised his voice. That's the point. He could have had a Glock. But he didn't, Fletcher said flatly. He had a wallet. We found it on the floorboard. Did you see a wallet, officer? I saw a movement. You saw a black man in a Mercedes, Fletcher corrected, her voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerous. And that offended you, didn't it? Objection, Lang shouted. Argumentative. Sustained, Judge Hargrove said. Watch it, Miss Fletcher. Fletcher backed off, pacing the length of the jury box. You testified that Agent Hale was verbally aggressive, that he cursed at you. He did. He was screaming. Special Agent Corbin Hale, Fletcher mused. A veteran of the FBI, a man who spent years undercover with the Sinaloa cartel, a man trained to maintain his composure while having a gun pressed to his forehead. You want the jury to believe that this man lost his cool over a traffic ticket? Everyone has a bad day, Grant sneered. Maybe he thought his badge made him untouchable. Or maybe, Fletcher stopped pacing and looked directly at Grant. You are projecting. Maybe you think your badge makes you untouchable. Tell me, Officer Whitaker, what is a ghost stop? Grant froze. The color drained from his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. Lang stood up halfway. Objection, relevance. It goes to credibility and pattern of practice, Your Honor, Fletcher shot back. I'll link it up. I'll allow it, Hargrove ruled. Answer the question, officer. I don't know what that term means, Grant lied. His voice was thinner now. Really? Fletcher walked back to her table and picked up a piece of paper. Because according to text messages recovered from your personal cell phone, not your work phone, your personal iPhone, you used that term multiple times the week before the assault. Specifically, you texted Sergeant Tanner, need 2 more ghost stops to hit quota on seizures. Would you like me to read the definition of a ghost stop for the jury? Grant gripped the armrests of the chair until his knuckles turned white. A ghost stop was a term used by corrupt units for pulling over luxury cars on fabricated grounds to seize cash or assets under civil forfeiture laws, often without filing an official arrest report if they could just take the money and run. I was joking, Grant croaked. It's locker room talk. Is breaking a man's jaw locker room talk? Fletcher asked. Is leaving a federal agent bleeding in the street locker room talk? I didn't know he was a Fed, Grant shouted, losing his composure. If I knew he was a Fed, do you think I would have touched him? The courtroom went silent. Fletcher smiled. It was a cold, victorious smile. Thank you, officer. You just admitted it. You didn't hit him because he was a threat. You hit him because you thought he was a nobody. You hit him because you thought there would be no consequences. The badge didn't matter to you until it was a federal one. She turned to the judge. I have no further questions for this witness at this time, but I reserve the right to recall him pending the introduction of new evidence. New evidence? Lang asked, looking nervous. What new evidence? Discovery is closed. Not when it just arrived this morning, Fletcher said, glancing back at Corbin Hale. Hale was leaning forward, his elbows on the table. He looked at Grant Whitaker, and for the first time he spoke. His voice was raspy through the wires holding his jaw together, but it carried to the back of the room. Checkmate, Hale whispered. The recess was chaos. Preston Lang dragged Grant into a private consultation room, his face a mask of fury. You texted Tanner about ghost stops on your personal line? Lang hissed, slamming his briefcase onto the table. Are you insane? You told me your phone was clean. You told me you burned it. I deleted the threads. Grant paced the small room, sweating profusely. I deleted everything. How did they get that? They're the FBI, Lang shouted. They don't need your phone. They went to the carrier. They went to the cloud. Fletcher played you. She got you to admit you only stopped him because you thought he was a civilian. That's a civil rights violation right there. We just lost the qualified immunity defense. Fix it. Grant grabbed Lang by the lapels. I am not going to prison, do you hear me? I am a cop. I run this city. I am not going to general population with the animals I put away. Lang shoved him off. Sit down and shut up. I need to think. She said new evidence. That scares me more than the texts. What do they have? Nothing, Grant insisted, though his hands were trembling. Tanner scrubbed the dash cam. I smashed the body cam. There's no CCTV on that corner. It's my word against his. It better be, Lang muttered. Back in the courtroom, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to electric. Rumors were flying. The press gallery was typing furiously. The blue wall of officers on the right side of the gallery looked uneasy. Some of them had quietly left during the recess, sensing the tide turning. They didn't want to be seen supporting a sinking ship. Judge Hargrove banged her gavel. Court is back in session. Miss Fletcher, you mentioned new evidence regarding the admissibility of which we need to discuss. Yes, Your Honor, Fletcher said. She held up a small black hard drive. It looked innocuous, but to Grant, it looked like a grenade. The defense has repeatedly relied on the fact that there is no video footage of the incident due to technical malfunctions of the police equipment. However, the defense failed to account for the victim's vehicle. Lang stood up. Objection. We searched that car. There was no dash cam. Not a third-party dash cam, no, Fletcher agreed. Agent Hale was driving a Mercedes-Benz S-Class seized from a money laundering operation and repurposed for undercover bureau use. But this wasn't a stock vehicle. The FBI's Technical Support Division, specifically the Quantico engineering team, retrofitted this vehicle with the Sentinel V surveillance package. Grant felt his stomach drop through the floor. Sentinel 5, Fletcher explained, turning to the jury. is an integrated 360-degree recording system hidden within the chassis of the vehicle. It uses the car's existing sensors, cameras in the grille, the side mirrors, and the rear bumper, but it routes the feed to a secure encrypted server via satellite uplink. It is designed to record interactions during cartel meets. It records even when the car is off. It records audio inside and outside the vehicle. She paused, letting the weight of the technology sink in. The local police, including Sergeant Tanner, could not delete this footage because it was never on the car. It was uploaded instantly to the FBI servers in Virginia. It took us weeks to get the encryption keys declassified for this trial. We received them this morning. Lang looked like he was about to vomit. Your Honor, this is ambush by trial. We haven't seen this footage. I have a copy for the defense right here, Fletcher said, sliding a tablet across the table. But given the gravity of the accusations that a police officer fabricated an assault to justify brutality, I ask that we play it for the jury immediately. Judge Hargrove looked at Lang. I'll give you time to review it, counselor. Then we play it. The wait felt endless. Grant and Lang huddled over the tablet. As the video played, Grant watched his life end. It wasn't just a video, it was high-definition cinema. The audio was crystal clear, picked up by high-gain microphones meant to catch whispers in a drug deal. When the court reconvened, the silence was absolute. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. Play the tape, Judge Hargrove ordered. The large screens mounted on the courtroom walls flickered to life. Video feed, Sentinel Vive, Cam LF, left front cam, int, interior. The screen is split. On the left, a view down the side of the car. On the right, the interior view of Corbin Hale. Hale is driving calmly. He is humming along to a jazz track on the radio. He is not swerving. He is driving perfectly straight. Blue lights flash in the rear view. Hale turns down the music. Hale to himself. Great. What now? He pulls over smoothly. He puts the car in park. He rolls the window down a few inches. Hale clearly. Siri, start recording. He taps his phone. Hale places both hands on the top of the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 positions. His fingers are spread wide. He is the picture of compliance. Grant Whitaker appears in the left side camera. He is already walking with his hand on his holster. He looks aggressive. Roll it all the way down. Hale. Good evening, officer. My window mechanism is a bit sticky, but I can hear you fine. My hands are on the wheel. How can I help you? Whitaker. License and registration, now. Hale. It is in my breast pocket. I am going to reach for it slowly with my right hand. I am a federal agent. My credentials are with my license. The audio is pristine. Everyone in the courtroom hears Hale identify himself. Whitaker. I don't care if you're the King of England, boy. Get out of the car. Hale. Officer, I am complying. There is no need to exit the vehicle for a traffic stop. What is the probable cause? On the screen, Grant's face twists into a sneer. Probable cause is whatever I say it is. Get your black ass out of this car before I drag you out. Gasps erupted in the gallery. The racial slur hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Grant closed his eyes at the defense table. On the video, Hale remains calm. Too calm. Officer, I'm giving you a direct order to de-escalate. I am Special Agent Corbin Hale. You are making a mistake. Grant rips the door open. He doesn't wait. He grabs Hale by the lapel of his suit. You threatening me? Hale's hands never leave the steering wheel area until he is physically yanked. He does not reach for the console. He does not reach for a weapon. He is pulled out. The view switches to the exterior camera. Grant throws Hale against the hood. Hale, I am armed. Badge on left hip. Do not shoot. Whitaker, shut up. Grant pulls back his fist and delivers a haymaker to the side of Hale's face. The sound of the impact, a sickening crunch of bone, echoed through the courtroom speakers. Hale crumples to the pavement. Grant stands over him, panting. He looks around. He reaches up and taps his chest, turning off his body camera. Whitaker, captured by the car's mic. That shut you up, tough guy. FBI. Yeah, right. Probably stole the badge, too. The video ends. The screen went black. No one moved. Then the courtroom exploded. Order, order. Judge Hargrove hammered her gavel, her face flushed with anger. One more outburst and I will clear this court. She turned her eyes to Grant Whitaker. If looks could execute, Grant would be dead. "Mr. Lang," the judge said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage, "do you have any explanation for the discrepancy between your client's testimony and the evidence we just viewed?" Lang stood up slowly. He looked defeated. He looked at Grant, then back at the judge. He started to speak, but Grant interrupted him. "It's fake!" Grant screamed, jumping up. "It's a deep-fake AI. They doctored it." "Sit down, Mr. Whitaker." The bailiff moved in, hand on his taser. "The FBI doctored it." Grant was frantic now, eyes wild. He wasn't calm. He reached. I saw him reach. Corbin Hale slowly stood up from the prosecution table. He walked to the center of the aisle, ignoring the chaos. He looked straight at Grant. "Officer Whitaker," Hale said, his voice cutting through the noise, "there is one more thing you should know." Grant stopped shouting, panting heavily. "What? What do you want?" "That night," Hale said, "I wasn't just driving home. I wasn't on a random patrol." Hale reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it and held it up. It was a warrant. "I was the lead investigator on Operation Clean Sweep. We've been investigating your unit for months. Racketeering, drug distribution, and civil rights violations. I was parked on that street because I was waiting for you." Hale smiled, a cold, hard smile. "I didn't think you'd be stupid enough to assault the man sent to arrest you," Hale said. "But you made my case a hell of a lot easier. That stop wasn't bad luck, Grant. It was a test and you failed." The twist hit Grant like a physical blow. He hadn't just assaulted a random agent. He had assaulted the man holding the file on his entire corrupt life. He had walked right into the lion's den and punched the lion in the mouth. I, Grant stammered. "Marshals!" Judge Hargrove barked. "Take the defendant into custody. Bail is revoked. He is a flight risk and a danger to the community." As the marshals moved in, cuffing Grant's hands behind his back, the same hands that had held the badge of authority only moments ago, Grant looked at the gallery. The blue wall was gone. Every single uniformed officer had left the room. He was alone. But the nightmare was only just beginning, because Grant Whitaker was about to learn that federal prison is a very different place for a cop who makes headlines. The fallout from the Sentinel-5 video was nuclear. The trial, which had begun as a battle of inches, turned into a rout. The jury deliberated quickly. When they returned, they didn't look at the floor. They looked right at Grant Whitaker. Their eyes weren't filled with pity. They were filled with the collective anger of a city tired of being bullied. "Guilty," the foreman read, "on the count of aggravated assault. Guilty on the count of obstruction of justice. Guilty on the count of violation of civil rights." Each guilty was a hammer blow driving Grant deeper into his chair. But the true horror wasn't the verdict. He had expected that the moment the video played. The horror was what happened next. The sentencing hearing was scheduled later. In that time, Grant sat in a solitary holding cell, watching his world dismantle on a small television screen bolted to the wall. He watched as the dominoes fell. It wasn't just him. The Operation Clean Sweep that Agent Hale had mentioned was tearing through the department. But the news reports revealed something that made Grant vomit into his stainless steel toilet. Sources confirmed that Sergeant Royce Tanner, Grant's direct supervisor, has accepted a plea deal. In exchange for immunity on racketeering charges, Tanner has agreed to testify regarding the systemic corruption within the unit, identifying Grant Whitaker as the ringleader of the Ghost Stop scheme. Grant screamed at the TV, "Ringleader? I was the rookie. Tanner taught me the Ghost Stop. He showed me how to cook the books." He pounded on the cell door until his knuckles bled, screaming for his lawyer. But Preston Lang didn't come. Lang had withdrawn from the case, citing unpaid legal fees and a conflict of interest, now that the department was suing Grant to recoup his pension. On the day of sentencing, Grant was dragged back into Judge Hargrove's courtroom. The atmosphere was different now. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, clinical finality. The prosecution table was full. DA Naomi Fletcher looked tired but triumphant. Next to her sat Corbin Hale. His jaw was no longer wired, though a faint scar traced the line of his chin. He looked healthy, powerful, and in the witness box, sitting where Grant had sat, was Sergeant Royce Tanner. Tanner didn't look at Grant. He looked at the floor, sweating, his voice low. "Officer Whitaker was aggressive," Tanner told the court, reading from a prepared statement. "He was obsessed with the power. I tried to rein him in. I told him to stop targeting luxury cars, but he wouldn't listen. The assault on Agent Hale, that was all him. I was afraid of him. That's why I covered it up. I was afraid of what he'd do to me." Grant stood up, his chains rattling. "You liar! You coward! You took half of every seizure. You bought a boat with the money from the Fifth Avenue bust." "Sit down, Mr. Whitaker." The bailiff shoved him back down hard. Grant looked at Tanner, his eyes wide with the shock of total betrayal. The blue wall hadn't just crumbled, it had fallen on top of him. Tanner was feeding him to the wolves to save his own pension. Tanner would do time in a minimum security camp. Grant was going to be buried. When it was time for the sentence, Judge Hargrove adjusted her glasses. She looked at Grant with an expression of profound disappointment. "Grant Whitaker," she began, her voice echoing in the silent room. "You were given a badge, a gun, and the trust of the people. You used the badge as a hunting license. You used the gun as a tool of intimidation, and you treated the trust of the people with absolute contempt." She flipped a page in the file. "The defense asks for leniency. They cite your years of service, but your service was a lie. You didn't serve the community. You preyed upon it. You assaulted a federal agent, not out of fear, but out of arrogance. You believed that because of the color of his skin and the car he drove, he was fair game. You were wrong." Judge Hargrove leaned forward. "For the assault on Special Agent Hale, I sentence you to 10 years. For the obstruction of justice, 5 years. For the civil rights violations, 10 years. Grant did the math in his head. "However," Judge Hargrove continued, "given the severity of the corruption revealed by your former supervisor and your lack of remorse, these sentences will run consecutively, not concurrently. You are sentenced to a total of 25 years in a federal penitentiary. You will not be eligible for parole until you have served the vast majority of your term. You will be stripped of your pension, and your assets will be seized to pay restitution to the victims of your ghost stops." The gavel banged. It sounded like a gunshot. As the marshals hauled him up, Grant looked frantically at the gallery. His wife wasn't there. She had filed for divorce days ago. His friends weren't there. The only person looking at him was Corbin Hale. Grant stopped, digging his heels in. He looked at the FBI agent. "You set me up," he hissed. "You drove that car on purpose. You knew I'd stop you." Hale stood up slowly. He buttoned his suit jacket. He walked to the railing just inches from Grant. "I didn't make you stop me, Grant," Hale said softly. "I just gave you the opportunity to show the world who you really are. You had a choice. You could have asked for my license. You could have been a professional, but you chose to be a bully." Hale leaned in closer. "Enjoy prison. I hear the inmates have a special welcome party for cops who plant evidence." "You can't do this," Grant screamed as the marshals dragged him toward the side door. "I'm a cop. They'll kill me in there. I need protection. I need PC." Hale watched him go, his expression unreadable. "Justice is blind, Grant," he murmured. "But karma sees everything." The transport bus smelled of diesel fumes, unwashed bodies, and despair. Grant Whitaker was shackled hand and foot, chained to a metal bar running along the floor of the bus. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that was 2 sizes too big, itching against his skin. He wasn't going to the local county jail. He was being transferred to USP Hazleton, a high-security federal penitentiary known as Misery Mountain. Grant kept his head down. He knew the rules. Don't make eye contact. Don't speak. Act crazy if you have to. But it was hard to hide. The news of his trial had been national. Every inmate with a TV knew his face. They knew he was the ghost stop cop. They knew he was the one who beat up a Fed. In the hierarchy of prison hate, dirty cops were at the very bottom, lower than snitches. The bus lurched to a halt. The gates of Hazleton groaned open. "Get up! Move it, ladies!" The guards shouted, prodding them with batons. Grant stumbled off the bus, blinking in the harsh sunlight of the prison yard. He scanned the faces of the guards, looking for a sympathetic look, a signal that he was part of the brotherhood. He got nothing. The corrections officers looked at him with disdain. To them, he was a disgrace to the uniform. He made their jobs harder because of cops like Grant. Every inmate hated every badge a little more. "Inmate number," a tall, burly guard barked. "Whitaker." Yes, sir," Grant stammered. "Look, I need to speak to the warden. There's been a mistake with my classification. I'm supposed to be in administrative segregation, protective custody." The guard laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "PC is full, Whitaker. We got a lot of celebrities in here this month. You're going to intake, then G block. G block? Grant's blood ran cold. G block was general population. You can't put me in Gen Pop. I'm a police officer. I have years on the force. You were a police officer. The guard corrected him, shoving him forward. Now you're just inmate number. Move. The intake process was a ritual of humiliation. Grant was stripped naked, sprayed with delousing powder, and forced to squat and cough while 3 guards watched, bored. They took his wedding ring, which he had managed to keep hidden until now, and tossed it into a plastic bag. "That's personal property," Grant protested. "It's contraband," the guard said, sealing the bag. Next, he was given a thin mattress, a toothbrush, and a bar of soap that smelled like lye. Then he was marched through the bowels of the prison. The noise was deafening. Shouts, banging on bars, the constant mechanical clank of heavy doors. As he walked down the central corridor of G Block, the noise stopped. It rippled down the line. Inmates stopped playing cards. They stopped doing push-ups. They walked to the bars of their cells and watched him pass. "Hey, officer," a voice hissed from a cell. "Remember me?" Grant didn't look. "That's him?" Another voice whispered. "That's the jawbreaker." "Fresh meat," a deep voice rumbled. "Smells like bacon." Grant stared straight ahead, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He was led to a cell on the upper tier. The guard unlocked the door and slid it open. "Home, sweet home," the guard said. Grant stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind him with a finality that echoed in his soul. The cell was tiny. A bunk bed, a metal toilet, a small sink, and a cellmate. Sitting on the bottom bunk was a man the size of a vending machine. He was bald, tattooed from neck to wrists. A spiderweb was inked over his left elbow. He was sharpening a plastic toothbrush against the concrete wall. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The man stopped and looked up. His eyes were dark, devoid of light. Grant swallowed hard. "I'm taking the top bunk." The man didn't speak. He just stared. "I don't want any trouble," Grant said, trying to summon his command voice, but it came out as a squeak. "I just want to do my time." The man stood up. He towered over Grant. He leaned in close, sniffing the air. "You smell like fear," the man said. His voice was gravel. "And you smell like a cop." "I was," Grant admitted, backing up until he hit the door. The man smiled, revealing a gold tooth. "My name is Titus. You know why I'm here, officer." "No," Grant whispered. "I'm here because of a taillight," Titus said. "Cop said I had a broken taillight. Found a kilo in the spare tire well. I didn't put it there, but the cop said he found it, said he saw me put it there." Grant trembled. It was the exact same scenario. "I got years, Titus said, stepping closer. "My little girl grew up without a daddy because a cop wanted to make a quota." I didn't arrest you," Grant pleaded. "That wasn't me." "Doesn't matter," Titus said. He reached out and poked Grant in the chest with a finger hard as stone. "You're all the same. You wear the badge. You think you're gods. But in here, there are no gods. Only devils." Titus turned back to his bunk. "You take the top bunk, you face the wall. If I hear you breathe, we're going to have a problem. If you snore, we have a problem. And when the lights go out, you better pray to whatever God you believe in that I'm in a good mood." Grant scrambled up to the top bunk. The mattress was barely an inch thick. He curled into a ball, pulling the scratchy wool blanket up to his chin. Night fell. The lights dimmed to a low red hum. The sounds of the prison changed. The shouting stopped, replaced by whispers and the occasional scream from a distant block. Grant Whitaker, the man who had strutted through the streets of Chicago like a king, lay in the dark, weeping silently. He realized then that 25 years wasn't just a number. It was an eternity. He thought about Corbin Hale. He thought about the punch. He thought about the moment of arrogance that had cost him his life. This is hard karma. But Grant was about to learn that karma wasn't done with him yet. Because Titus wasn't just a random inmate, and the blue wall outside had sent a message inside. A message that said, "Grant Whitaker is a loose end. Cut it." As Grant drifted into a fitful sleep, he didn't hear Titus slip off the bottom bunk. He didn't hear the whisper of the sharpened toothbrush moving through the air. "Wakey, wakey, officer." Titus whispered. The plastic shank hovered millimeters from Grant's right eye. You think death is the punishment? Titus whispered, his heavy frame blocking the dim light of the cell. Death is easy. You took years of my life. Now I own yours. Grant pressed into the corner of the top bunk, wept silently. He wasn't a cop anymore. He was property. Months later, Grant sat in the sterile visitation room at USP Hazleton. He looked years older. His nose was crooked from a fresh break. His hair was graying, and he had developed a permanent nervous tic. Opposite him, behind the bulletproof glass, sat Special Agent Corbin Hale, looking impeccable in a charcoal suit. You won, Grant rasped, his voice thin. My wife left. I cleaned toilets for a dealer just to keep my teeth. Why come here? Closure, Hale replied calmly. He pressed a photograph against the glass. It showed a young boy on a bicycle. His name was Andre. My nephew. Hale's eyes bored into Grant. Years ago, a rookie cop tackled a boy in South Chicago because he looked suspicious. The boy hit his head on the curb and died. The department buried it. You got a commendation? Grant's blood froze. He remembered. Accidental death. I promised my sister justice. Hey, soy. Hale continued. I watched you climb the ladder, turning into a monster. I waited until you felt so untouchable that you wouldn't see the trap. The tail light, Grant whispered. The broken tail light. There was no broken tail light. Hale smiled coldly. I cut the fuse myself 2 blocks away. I knew you were desperate for a seizure quota. I went fishing and you took the bait. The realization hit Grant like a physical blow. It wasn't bad luck. It was a long execution. And your lawyer, Hale added, delivering the final strike. He didn't quit because you ran out of money. He quit because I gave him a choice. Flip on you or face a laundering investigation. He chose himself. Grant stared, mouth agape. Every shield he had, the system, his lawyer, his badge, Hale had dismantled them all before they even met in that alley. Enjoy your time, inmate Whitaker, Hale said, hanging up the phone. Wait, you can't leave me here, Grant screamed, slamming his hand against the glass as Hale walked away. Titus will kill me. Hale didn't look back. Grant was led back to the cell block, back to the noise and the fear. He lay on his bunk, staring at the concrete ceiling, realizing he wasn't just in prison. He was in a hell designed specifically for him by the ghost of a boy he killed, and the uncle who never forgot. The sun had set on Grant Whitaker, and it was never coming back up. And that is the terrifying reality of what happens when the people entrusted to protect us decide they are above the law. Grant Whitaker thought his badge was a shield that could deflect any consequence. He thought he could break bones and ruin lives without ever paying the price. But he forgot the golden rule of the universe. You can only push karma so far before it pushes back. Grant didn't just lose his freedom, he lost his identity, his family, and his dignity, trapped in a cage with the very people he used to torment. It wasn't just a legal victory for Agent Hale. It was a masterclass in long-term justice. What do you guys think? Did Grant deserve the sentence, or was the trap set by Agent Hale too cruel? I want to hear your verdict in the comments below. Let's get a debate going. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes courtroom drama and satisfying justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching, and remember, no one is above the law. I'll see you in the next one.